Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are past Thanksgiving. December is about to arrive, and we have two teams left in Texoma still playing as we hit the 15th week of the season, also known as the region finals, also known as the state quarterfinals, which means in each division there are, count them with me, 8 teams left competing for a state championship. We have 2 teams left. We lost one team last week, unfortunately, that deprived us of what I thought would have been a really awesome All-Texomaland rematch from district play. And so that's where we stand at this point in the season. So like we do every week, we will look at last week's region semifinals and look ahead to the region final matchups that we have coming up this week. We're going to go a bit out of order because we only have the 2 games to look at, and we did lose just one team. So we will talk about the team that was eliminated last week, and that was the Bells Panthers. In a hard-fought defensive battle, they came up short against Holiday 21-14 in overtime in a game where they trailed going into the fourth quarter, 7-0, found a way to score a pair of touchdowns to take a 14-7 lead before Holiday forced overtime in the final minute and a half. Holiday scored on their opening possession of overtime. Bells was unable to do so, getting stopped on fourth down, just a couple yards short of the end zone. And Holiday ends up hanging on to win and advance to the region final. We talked about last week that this was a rematch from a couple months ago, and that game was almost as close as this one. That was a 27-14 win in regulation by Holiday. And we thought with a rematch, some of the guys that Bells had this time around that they did not have in that first meeting might end up making a difference. And in this game, Grady Waldrop led the way. He had 28 carries for 117 yards and a touchdown for Bells. Bo Baker added 15 carries for 74 yards. Blake Rowland had the other touchdown just on a short keeper with 4 minutes to go to give Bells the lead. But unfortunately, Holiday did just enough to pull this game out. Jax Johnson had the tying touchdown, and then he caught a touchdown pass from Peyton Marchand in the overtime. That was the difference. Marchand had the only other touchdown pass to Jackson Crutcher in the first quarter, and that was the only scoring until there were a little under 10 minutes to go in the game. So obviously it's very frustrating for Bells. They are sitting here. They have 4 losses. They finished 9-4, and 2 of the teams that beat them are still playing. We talked about that last week. Whitesboro is still playing. Gunner is still playing, and Holiday beat them twice. So there's not one loss that you can look at on Bells' schedule, and to bookend, they started the season with an overtime loss to Whitesboro. They lose this one in overtime, so I mean they're literally probably 1 or 2 plays away right there from having 2 wins. And we were hoping for that rematch with Gunner here in the region final. The plan was, it sounded like, to have that at Denison. It would have been great for the Grayson County. I think that place would have been packed. For what that would have meant. Bells has never been to the region final. They were trying to get there for the first time, so they would have made history. Gunner would have gone in as the favorite because they beat Bells, but they would have had the pressure to defend the region title against a team, just trying to continue to make history. And so I know that's frustrating for Bells. That they're at this point for the second time in 3 years. They get to the region semifinals. They win 9 games, and they're unable to, knock off a really good opponent. But outside of that, obviously an outstanding season. Like we said, they don't have a loss that you look at and say, well, how did that happen? They finished second in district to Gunner for the second straight year. The big thing with with Bells, of course, is again, we talk about realignment. That is always a factor, and it sounds and it looks like that Gunner and Bells will be together again. There's no indication that's potentially going to change at this point. And so obviously their goal will be to somehow find a way to get to the top spot in the district. And at the very worst, keep a stranglehold on second place to finish as best as they can. There may be some minor changes in that district. I think Howe could be dropping down. We've talked about this, on a weekly basis, but Howe could be dropping down into that district. Whitwright could be moving out of that district if they end up dropping down to 2A, which is something we'll know here in about another week or so. Like I said, we're still waiting for those cutoffs from the UIL to say what is 2A, what is 3A, what is 4A, etc., and then what is the cutoff between 3A Division 1 and 3A Division 2. Those are things hopefully we'll learn here in the next couple of weeks, and I'll probably do a maybe not an extensive podcast, but just a short podcast to tick off some of the things that we've learned at that point in time before we get to the big day in February when they announce all the districts. But and obviously, so you have that. That's obviously the one key factor for Bells is are they going to be stuck with Gunner again? Because obviously that's going to change your track in the postseason. But there were a lot of seniors on this roster that have been key contributors. For 3 years they've been 3-year starters. They were thrown in when Coach West came over and he built around this nucleus, and what they've been able to do across their careers is have some of the best seasons in school history have happened because of them. And so you're talking about a lot of guys who were two-way guys, whether it was multiple seasons or just this year. But obviously you're going to have to replace a Bo Baker and what he did not just on both sides of the ball but in the return game. You're going to have a change at quarterback for the first time in 3 years with the graduation of Blake Rowland. You have guys on defense like Caden Pyle and Canyon Payne that are multiple year starters. You can go through each level of the defense. Ben Burleson on the defensive line. I'm just trying to run down my list here. You have obviously the offensive line. You have guys there in Tanner Hayes and Jackson Harlan. You have all these guys that there's such a big group that has been there for so long. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Bells. And they do have talent coming back. We've seen that all year. Obviously, it starts in the backfield because of the slot team and what they run. But Brock Baker is going to be back as a senior. Grady Waldrop's going to be back as a senior. After missing a huge chunk of the season due to injury, he came back and played well down the stretch in the playoffs. Spencer Hines was a guy who was a starter on defense, but he filled in on offense and did that capably. Obviously, there'll be a new face at quarterback, and then you fill in some of these other spots, but there are guys. Cooper Smith is a guy on the defensive line. Like Waldrop, he'll be a senior next year. Missed a huge chunk of time this year because of a foot injury. So they have guys. They have guys that they're going to lean on. And the question is, can you fill in some of these gaps that you haven't really had to worry about for 2 or 3 years, and in a lot of cases in 3 years you just have always relied on, well, that guy's there, we have this guy coming back, and it's been that way for a while there. So it's going to be interesting to see what Bells is going to look like in a couple spots, but I think we are at the point now, even with that transition of with Coach Ponder leaving and Coach West taking over, Bells has turned into a team that is is always on the radar now, and that's something that when I first got here, that was definitely not the case. You want to talk about right now, just making the playoffs every year has become almost a given. This is a program that has made the playoffs every year since 2014, and you say, well, that's not a super long time. I mean, it's getting there. When you can say, hey, we've made the playoffs every year since 2014, and we're about to enter 2022 for that season. But you're also talking about a program that from 1998 through 2013 only made the playoffs once. And you're talking about a program that before 1988 only made the playoffs once. So there have been some little pockets of success. This is a program that before this current run since 2014 made the playoffs in back-to-back years just twice. 1988, 89, and 1996, 97. Before 2014, 2015, those were the only other times in school history that Bells made the playoffs 2 years in a row. And now we're sitting at you're almost touching a decade. You've made it 8 years in a row. You're going for 9, and that's something that hasn't been done here. And now that's what you think. When you think of the teams that have had success around here lately, Bells is in that top 5. They've been to the round of 16 2 of the last 3 years, and so I don't think anybody expects anything less. I know there was disappointment last year when they came up short of making the region semifinals because they thought they had a chance last year, and they were able to bounce back and get there again. And I know it's got to be crushing to know that you were a little more than a minute away from advancing and then going to overtime and then having to deal with all that. Holiday did not have some sort of big push. This was a game where neither team gained 250 yards. It was the proverbial rock fight. Both teams had 2 turnovers. Holiday barely had 200 yards of offense, and yet somehow they were able to put. And I think that's probably the more frustrating thing is that this was not, hey, we got run over and they put up big numbers and we just couldn't stop them. That sort of thing. They're going to look back and say we had chances here, if we get a stop here, that sort of thing. And I think those are always the more frustrating losses, especially when you go to overtime and you have that pressure of trying to keep the game alive. Obviously, we don't know if they would have gone for 2 points, if they would have scored to potentially win the game. I think they would have, just from what I know of that program and Coach West. And, I think they went into that game. I'm sure everybody went into that game saying, well, Holiday's undefeated. They've already beaten Bells. Bells is the underdog type of a thing. And I think at that point in the game, it's been such a struggle to score that maybe at that point you decide, hey, let's just go for it. We're at the 2-yard line. We're a running offense. That's what that's what we're going to do. Why have it rely on extra points or that sort of thing? But again, a great season for Bells. I was really looking forward to the potential of the Gunner Bells rematch to see what that would have brought. Obviously, Bells was ready for this rematch. They were ready last week to beat Eastland when they beat Eastland in a rematch, and they really competed well in a rematch that I think maybe a lot of people thought Holiday was going to be able to win like they did last time, and Bells gave them all they could handle. So hats off to Bells. After making the region semifinals again for the second time in 3 years. But we do have 2 teams that are still playing, and they both are in 3A. We'll start in Division 1 with the Whitesboro Bearcats, who continue to march along, putting up some big numbers. And they did that again last week in the region semifinals when they won 50-25 against Shallow Water. And so they advanced to the 3A Division I Region 1 final against Brock. And Brock won 70-25 against Jim Ned. So you have a 9-4 Whitesboro against 13-0 Brock, who is coming off a win over the defending state champions in Jim Ned. And this, of course, is a rematch from district play in 4-3A Division I. That was a game that Brock won 42-21. And you may look at that score and you may say, oh, that's not good for Whitesboro because that's losing by 3 touchdowns. But for those who remember way back in Week 7, Whitesboro, and this was on the road, Whitesboro went to Brock, and it was tied 21-21 at halftime. And everybody was like, whoa, hey, this is the first time that Brock has been tested all season. And it really was. And even the final score is one of the first time that Brock has been tested. So we do have a rematch, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But we will talk about the fact that Whitesboro is in the region final for the first time in school history. Have never been this far. Had been to the region semifinals like we talked about. This was the third time that they had been to the region semifinals. And this was a game that was pretty close for a quarter and a half. Whitesboro led 8-7 after the first quarter. Extended that lead to 15-7. Then Shallowwater kicked a field goal, and then right before halftime, Whitesboro was able to get a touchdown to go up 21-10, and I don't know if that may have open the floodgates is probably not a good term, but I think it maybe changed the direction of the game because there was a chance at that point. It's only 15 to 10 at halftime, and then Shallowwater ends up going to score the only touchdown in the third quarter. If that score had been 15-10, Shallowwater ends up taking a lead into the fourth quarter, but instead they end up trailing, and then Whitesboro explodes for 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Another big effort from Mac Harper, who ends up with completing 16 of 22 passes for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also ran for the touchdown right before halftime, so he had a hand in the 3 touchdowns. Asher Contreras had 13 carries for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jake Hermes had one of the touchdown catches. He had 2 catches for 52 yards. Jacob Smith, his lone catch, went for a touchdown for 39 yards. Jay Sanders led the receivers. He had 6 catches for 65 yards. And then to put the game away, really, it's, I guess, what is that? A 36, so it's 36-25. Middle of the fourth quarter when Shallowwater scores to make it 36-25, and Shallowwater gets the ball back. They have a chance to cut into that lead, and Sean Shares comes up with a 36-yard interception return for a touchdown, and then Clay Hermes in the final minute finishes that off with a touchdown run, and there's your 50 points. And we say it every week. We'll say it again after this week. Whitesboro was rolling. They continue to. It's almost the same formula. They've had all these key games. They're putting up gigantic numbers, and they're doing it in all 3 phases. They're getting points from their defense, and the offense is clicking. Once they got on this roll, it's been on a roll. We talked about, as part of this 6-game winning streak, we talk about the point totals: 64, 35, 52, 56, 41, 50. And the highest point total that they've allowed is 28. And that was 5 games ago. So, since in the last month they've given up. It's a bad trend because it's going upwards. It's 9, 14, 21, 25, but you kind of expect that, as you get deeper into the playoffs. But like I said, if you're playing somebody and you're basically holding people to 3 touchdowns or less, you've got a really good chance to win. So the offense is playing really well, the defense is playing really well, and now they're going to face their toughest test of the season. Probably by far in the biggest game of in program history because they've never been here. They've got a chance to get to the state semifinals for the first time, and they're going to have to do it against a team that has been here before, has been there, done that. So this is the first time for Whitesboro and all the excitement that goes with that. This is the 7th straight year that Brock is in the region final, and they're trying to get to the state semifinals for the 5th time. So they have a lot of guys who know what this is all about. I did get to cover them in one of those state semifinals a couple years ago when they played Pottsboro for the spot at state that Pottsboro was able to hang on and win at the end. And so they have kids that know what it's like to play in big games. Obviously, each week Whitesboro is gaining that confidence and even though the games get bigger, obviously, they've played a month of playoffs, so that this is obviously not new for them. And I think it does help a little bit that they are playing a team that, one, they've played before, so they know what they're getting into. I think if they were playing Jim Ned, who was, like I said, was the defending state champion until Brock beat them, would have been coming in at the same record at 13-0, and you're like, oh my God, we're playing the defending champs. And we've never been this far, and all that goes with that. So I think this sort of does help, and I think it does help that Whitesboro knows that they can play with Brock. They did for a half. The only question is going to be, can they find a way to make that go a little deeper into the second half? And if they can, that's going to put the pressure on Brock, because I think everybody, especially after what they did last week, I mean, if Brock is not the favorite in Division I, I don't know who would be. So I think all the pressure is obviously on Brock in this situation. It's a team that puts up a ton of points. The 40, you hate to say, Whitesboro held them to 42, but that's basically holding them to 42, because Brock put up a ton of points this year. They scored 68 points, at least 68 points 4 times, including last week. They're averaging over 52 points a game. And if you just look at their game log, the opening game they scored 31, and then they've scored 47, 41, 68, 35. That was right before they played Whitesboro at 42. And then since they played Whitesboro, it's been 70, 55, 80, 47, 40, 54, 70. So they can score with the best of them, and the fact that 42 is one of their lower point totals, and not just that, the game before Brock played Whitesboro, they played Paradise, and that score was only 35-16. That was a 19-point margin. That's the only game, other than Whitesboro's 21-point margin, the 42-21 score, that is the closest game that Brock has had. So Brock has not had a game so far this season closer than 19 points. And so, nobody has really put up points against them. The 25 points scored by Jim Ned, that's the only team that has scored more points on Brock than Whitesboro. Whitesboro had scored the 21 against Whitesboro. That was the season high for Brock until Jim Ned scored 25 this last week. And to be fair, 2 of those touchdowns came in the fourth quarter when I think it was 70-12 at that point. I'd have to double check that for sure, but I think so it was 70-12, and then Jim Ned scored twice in the final 6 minutes of the game just to get to the 25 points. So they scored 2 of their touchdowns when the game was well out of hand. Whitesboro scored all their points, like I said, in the first half when it was a tie game at halftime. So it's going to be really interesting. This is a Thursday night game at 7 o'clock. It's at Globe Life Field, and yes, that is the home of the Texas Rangers in Arlington. So if you don't have anything going on, there's only a couple, and I say literally only a couple. I think it's either 2 or 3 games on Thursday night. So this is one of the games that everybody in the state's going to be looking at because there's not a lot of games on Thursday. And so I would hope that a lot of people might be able to go out there and go watch it. I know the Cowboys play, so there's that to kind of take away your interest, but to get a chance to go, I'm interested. I'm going to be there. I'm interested to see what football looks like in that stadium, how it's going to be, and I think that's a cool thing about this time of year is you get to play in some bigger venues and some cool places, and this is obviously a chance for that to happen at Globe Life Field at 7 o'clock on Thursday. And if you would like to look ahead, because that's my job, it may not be the coach's job and it may not be the team's job, but it is my job. We will look ahead and we'll say the winner of this is going to play the Mount Vernon West winner in the state semifinals. I would imagine that's 2 totally different directions in terms of finding a place to play. So that would be kind of interesting to see if Whitesboro does advance and to see who advances as well. And of course, that would be the interesting thing. The winner is obviously going to have an extra day to rest up because that game's going to be on Friday. So the winner of this game will not know who they play until Friday night. So that's Whitesboro against Brock, the District 4 3A Division I rematch, and the Division I Region I final in 3A. Thursday night, 7 o'clock at Globe Life Field. I've been there for baseball. I haven't been there for football yet, so I'm excited to see 13-0 Brock against 9-4 Whitesboro. See if Whitesboro can continue this great season, the best season in school history, by getting to the region final, and we'll see if they can get to the state semifinals when they play on Thursday night. And the other team, which is no surprise, if I would have said to you there's going to be at least one team playing in December from Grayson County and from Texomaland, I think 100% the answer would have been the Gunner Tigers, and they are in the Class 3A Division II Region II final, and of course they're going to play Holiday because that was the other semifinal, was Holiday and Bells. So we talked about what Holiday did to get here. Gunner getting here, and obviously also this is 13-0 versus 13-0. They won 62-20 against Dublin in their region semifinal, and this was an interesting game because this is probably the first time in a while, for sure, that Gunner was actually tested in the first half. And I know that's sort of a weird thing to say at this point of the year when we're about to play game number 14. But as anybody who has followed the Gunner Tigers this year knows, the one thing that they have done is jump on teams early, no matter what, and usually the game is over by halftime because the score is something like 42-0, 49-7, 62-0. And so the fact that this was a game that was in doubt was obviously something new for this group. I think before this game, I think their closest game at halftime was probably against Whitesboro. But even that game, that game was 21-0. Was it 21-0 at halftime? And it was 21-0 after the first quarter. So I don't know. Like I said, is a 3-touchdown lead close? Especially when you jump on a team in the first quarter like that. I don't know, but that was by far the closest game that Gunner has dealt with before this week. This was a game that was 13-7 late in the second quarter. Gunner leading, and then after Dublin scored to make it 13-7. Hudson Graham returned the kickoff, 72 yards for a touchdown with 2 minutes to go in the first half to get the lead out to 20-7. And even after that, Dublin went down and had a chance to score right before the half, and Gunner was able to hang on. Otherwise, it could have been 20-14 at halftime. And then, as I wrote in my game story, because this was the game that I did on Friday, what Gunner normally does in the first half, they did in the second half. They came out in the third quarter, went boom, 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 4 touchdowns, and turned a turned a close game into a rout, and it was it was 49 to nothing, 49-7 going into the fourth quarter. Dublin was able to tack on a couple of touchdowns in the fourth quarter, as did Gunner. Some of the highlights in this one: Ethan Sloan, 10 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown. Hudson Graham, we mentioned he had the kickoff return. He also ran for a touchdown and had a touchdown pass of 32 yards to Cole Lemons. Most of the yardage was on the ground. Gunner ran for 479 yards on 46 carries. Graham was only 5 of 6 passing for 67 yards, and Lemons had 2 catches for 41 yards to lead there. Ashton Bennett, 8 carries, 122 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then also adding in touchdowns on the ground as the yardage was kind of spread out past those 2 guys. We mentioned Graham had the touchdown run. Saul Rodriguez, Braden Hinton, Cannon Lemberg, they all had touchdown runs as well. And for the most part, it was the final score. The road to get to the final score of 62-20 was a little bit different. That was a season high in points that Gunner has allowed. Before this, they had only allowed, the high was 15 points against Lone Oak in district play. So Dublin became the first team to score 3 touchdowns against Gunner. And I will say, they had other chances. They had some long drives. They were able to move the ball both a little bit on the ground and also, but definitely through the air. And we knew that going in. We said, Dublin is a pass happy team. They threw the ball 40 times in this game, and they had chances where they got inside the 10-yard line, and they had chances to score. And obviously, in the long run, if they would have kicked field goals, it would not have mattered. At the time, you don't know, because it made the game closer at the time, especially because it was in the first half. But Dublin kind of figured field goals are not going to win us this game. We have to score touchdowns. We're at the 6-yard line. We're at the 8-yard line. We have to get touchdowns. We cannot get field goals. So they went for it on a couple of occasions, and they came up short. But if they get those touchdowns, now we're talking. It maybe is a different ball game. Maybe they somehow have a 1-point lead at halftime. Maybe it's 21-20 at halftime instead of being down 20-7. But Gunner made the plays when they had to. They forced. They got a couple fumble recoveries. One was a strip sack right in front of the end zone. Ivy Hellman forced it, and Braden Hinton fell on it. And then the first play after that was a touchdown by Bennett running it in. So they made enough plays when they had to. They made the stops in the red zone when they had to. We kind of thought that this would potentially be the first game, especially here in the playoffs, that Gunner would be tested. And for the most part, that was true. I mean, obviously the final score, when you win by 42, it's hard to say that you were tested. It's the third straight game that Gunner scored 62 points. They've done that in all their playoff games. But the first games were definitely, routes. Those games were over in the first half. Gunner did almost all their scoring in the first half of those games. And obviously this was a game that I think in the long run was good for them. Coach Vizell, basically said as much. You never know how kids are going to respond until it's actually happening, and you have to make a play. You have to make a stop. You have to go score, because it's only, we're only up 6-0 after the first quarter. There's probably been 7 or 8 games where Gunner's been up 3 or 4 touchdowns after the first quarter, just because they're so much better than a lot of the people that they've played. And this was the first time that, they really had to play guys, not just through the third quarter, but into the fourth quarter, to make sure that this game ended the way it did. And this is the point of the season where that needs to happen, because Holiday is going to be a pretty good opponent. It's also a familiar opponent. We talked about last week that no matter who Gunner would play, if Gunner were to advance, it's somebody that they know well. Obviously, they played Bells earlier in the season. And for Holiday, they've played them a bunch in the playoffs. They've played 5 times recently. They were in a district together, and then they would meet in the playoffs. This is the 3rd time in 4 years that these teams have met in the region final, not just in the playoffs, but in the region final. And the one thing that has helped Gunner prevail in this matchup is the defense. Holiday has yet to score more than 13 points in any of the games against Gunner. So obviously we know how good Gunner's defense is. They are the 5-time defending region champs. So Gunner is obviously it is their title until someone takes it from them. The last time that they did play was in a region final. That was in 2019. Gunner won 27-9 in that one. And that's the thing, is that Holiday's calling card is more running game defense. And the thing I think in these and I've done a couple of these matchups, is Holiday has, as we said, they've struggled to find a way to put up not just a big number, but like a decent number. Like, hey, we can score 28 points on you, or we can score, maybe get to 35 against Gunner. But the thing that has kept them in some of these games is their defense. They have a really good defense. They're just a hard-nosed, gritty group. And this group, you sit there and you say, oh, hey, they're 13-0, and we talked about Brock. Brock is killing people. We talk about Gunner. Gunner kills people. We sit here and we can go back and look, and you say, you look at these scores and you go, there's not a close game. It's this is Gunner game by game. We can do this if we have time, because we don't have many games to talk about. But this is Gunner from the start of the season. 43-7, 51-7, 28-7, 59-6, 56-0, 41-14, 55-12, 49-14, 77-15, 49-7, 62-7, 62-12, 62-20. So the only game in there that is a 3-score game is the win over Whitesboro, who obviously, as we know, is still playing. They won that game 28-7. Outside of that, that 28 points, their next lowest point total is 41, which was against Bells. And like we said, you heard those opponent scores. Everything was 15 points or under before playing Dublin this past week. And that's a 13-0 team. And that's Gunner. This is Whitesboro's. This is Holiday's game by game to be 13-0. And at the same point, these are their scores by game from the start of the season: 20-14, 52-7, 36-7, 27-14, 34-12, 80-16, 26-6, 62-14, 41-0, 56-13, 63-12, 35-28, 21-14 in overtime. And that's so the defense is there, the offense is there in spurts, but we're talking about a high score of 20, 36, 27, 34, 26, 35, 21 in overtime. They're not obviously as explosive, but defensively, you heard some of those same numbers. You're single digits of only giving up 7 points, giving up 6 points, shutting somebody out. Now, the two interesting things about Holiday's run in the playoffs is 2 weeks ago they beat Leonard. They beat Leonard 35-28 in a game where they had to score late to pull out that game. Then last week, We talked about, we led off the podcast talking about playing Bells, winning 21-14 in overtime. Both of those teams coming out of Gunner's district. So Gunner has played both of those teams. Gunner beat Bells 41-14, and then the next week beat Leonard 55-12. And Leonard, the 28 points scored by Leonard is the most points that Holiday has allowed this season. So, I don't know if you want to play that game of, well, if Holiday's only a touchdown better than Leonard, and Gunner is four touchdowns better, 5 touchdowns better than Leonard, and if if Holiday has to go to overtime to beat Bells by 7, and Bells is 24 touchdowns worse against Gunner. I don't know if you want to play that game, you can, and I don't know if you're entirely wrong by doing that. But if that's the case, then I don't know if Holiday is able to hang in both areas. Now, there is the fact that when they have played, like I mentioned, the scores are close. So I think this is a situation like Whitesboro Brock. You have two programs that are very familiar with each other, that you have seniors that have played in games against them that have not been blowouts. I do not think that they look at this and go, "Oh my God, we have to play Gunner. How are we going to defeat this team?" So I think that does help Holiday. But I also think that when you look at it and you say, well, Gunner won 2 years ago and it was 27-9 and 20-7 in district play, so they played twice that year, 2019. Then the year before that, 2018, they played twice. Gunner won 27-6 and 30-13. So the last 4 meetings, Holiday has scored 13-6, 7 and 9 points. Gunner has scored 27-20, 27-30. So I don't know. I think Holiday plays Gunner better than maybe the stats might allow one to think. I don't think this has. I mean, I could see 35-14 as a score if we're looking to throw out scores for this game. I don't know. I mean, Gunner is really good, and I don't know from a defensive standpoint if they have played anybody that's better than Holiday. I think maybe Holiday and Whitesboro might be on the same level defensively. So I put it in that range. The question is, I don't know if a team that wants to run the ball and likes to run the ball can do that against the Gunner defense. I think Dublin had success because they had big receivers. They were willing to throw it up, one-on-one coverage, maybe get a penalty, which they got a couple times, maybe get a big play with a big receiver on a small defensive back. Take chances because you're the underdog. I think a lot of that falls into play. But I know Holiday also thinks they're pretty good. They're 13-0 for a reason. They have played some good people. They played Iowa Park. They played Eastland, who obviously is a playoff team that Bells beat. They played Bells, had to beat them twice. I mean, that's saying something right there. They played they played some decent people in their district. I just beating Leonard and Bells the last couple weeks. I just don't know how this doesn't end in a Gunner win. And Holiday sits there and is cursing that they had to face Gunner again with a trip to the state semifinals on the line. So we'll see what happens. This is a game, again, this is Friday at 7 o'clock at Justin Northwest. And I'm going to be at both of the games this week, so I get to see Whitesboro actually for the first time this season, thanks to them being in Region 1 and playing all these games super far away. This is the first time, obviously, that after the first round, playing in Castleberry, they're coming back to the Metroplex after two deep runs. Unfortunately for Gunner fans who might be looking ahead to plan for next week, the winner of this game will play the Abernathy Lubbock Roosevelt winner. You will note that I did not say that one of those teams is Canadian, because Canadian did not get out of the region semifinals. And so for the first time during this Gunner run, we will not have Gunner Canadian Part 6, which I think some people would have been interested in, just to see, hey, how is it that these teams keep playing each other in the state semifinals? But I think also there's also the if either side had lost before the state semifinals, I think somebody would have been happy just to play somebody different, just for the fun of it. And Abernathy did beat Canadian 37-26 last week. So there will be a new champion in Division 2. And I would imagine, there for whatever reason, people still have, they still have Franklin as the favorite to win the whole thing. And I don't think people have swayed off of that just yet. But if you look at the teams that are left in Division 2, obviously I think people think Gunner is going to win against Holiday and come out of Region 2. I don't know who the favorite is between Abernathy and Lubbock Roosevelt. The bad thing about that, obviously, is both of those teams, obviously Roosevelt's in Lubbock and Abernathy's just a little north of Lubbock. So that's going to mean a long road trip somewhere west. I would say, Vernon's probably, we're looking at Vernon again. I don't think that, Wichita Falls maybe, but it's if we're in that, just get in that mindset that's probably the way it's going to look next week. And then in Region 3, you have Dangerfield and Wascom, who are two teams that obviously Gunner is familiar with from previous playoff runs, or in the case of Dangerfield, not just in the playoffs, but they played them in the regular season. I believe they pulled that with a double when they played in the playoffs back in 2017, and then played them 2018, 2019 to open the season, and those were some close games. So they have a recent history there, obviously, with Dangerfield, and then Wascom as well, going back to 15 and 16. Before this run started in 2016, Wascom was the last team to eliminate Gunner both in 15 and 14 from the playoffs after making some deep runs, including a region final appearance in 2014. So those are two teams in Region 3, and then down in Region 4, if I can pull that up real quick, as we look to Region 4, that's where Franklin is facing Poth, and I think obviously everybody thinks that Franklin's going to win that game. So that side of the bracket, definitely interesting to see what happens out there as well. But that's down the line. Obviously, Gunner's going to worry about Holiday, and then they'll worry about whoever they have to face out of Region 1. Should they win their sixth straight region crown, as they face Holiday in the 3A Division 2 Region 2 final Friday at 7 p.m. at Justin Northwest. So that's where we are. December is upon us. Football is still happening. Hopefully we have two games to worry about next week in the state semifinals. Hopefully Whitesboro can keep going. Gunner, I think everybody, like I said, expects them to win. But I think it would be great to have two teams again, like we had a couple years ago with Gunner and Pottsboro. let's just change the borough. We'll make it Whitesboro, and hopefully we'll have 2 teams in the state semifinals, trying to get to AT&T Stadium. And I will point out, because we can maybe foreshadow a little bit, because it has happened recently, so it would not be unheard of. But again, we could have that situation. It is still alive that you can, if you want to look ahead on your calendars, Thursday, December 16th. We are 2 weeks away. We could have the 3A Division I championship game is at 3:00, and then the 3A Division II championship game is at 7:00. So we could have that doubleheader again, like we had a couple years ago, with Whitesboro and Gunner, going with a doubleheader after the 2A Division II game in the morning, on that Thursday, December 16th. So just maybe something to potentially mark on the calendar a couple Thursdays from now that could be happening out at AT&T Stadium, and that'd be a really cool thing to see happen again. I know that was pretty fun to do that last time, and a lot of Texoma was out there to see that happen. So again, whatever game you go to, I would say stay warm if you're going to the Whitesboro game, but you're going to be inside, so you won't have to worry about it. But stay safe out there. Enjoy the games. Hopefully we have 2 teams to preview next week. Thanks, as always, for listening to the podcast, and we will talk to you next week.